hours. Bridgette Dolgoff and Kelsey Sweet will be sharing their knowledge and understanding with their own beautifully unique twists on all topics related to helping humanity to achieve betterment of health in body and in mind. Settle yourselves down on this fine Saturday evening. For now, it is time for Bridgette and Kelsey.
All right, everybody. It is Bridgette and Kelsey. Unfortunately, no, I'm just kidding.
Hi, Bridgette.
It's the two crazy chicolas from Reno, Nevada. And, today's our show. And so we also want to give a shout out to donations. And we've got 4 ways that you can donate here at Revolution Radio. Go to freedomslips.com, click the donation button. Also at the bottom where you can do like a little credit card, ATM card, even, your unemployment benefit card.
if you're getting them.
If you're getting them. And you can donate. We also have the Patreon button where you could give I don't know how much, I guess whatever you want, $5, $10 a month. We also have snail mail, so you can go ahead and send that out, a check or a money order. And then we also have Zazzle.com where you can get a mug of your favorite host or whatever kind of other amazing artwork that a mad painter is creating. T-shirts and all that jazz. Yeah, so also, yeah. So also while you're at freedomslips.com, you can go to Studio A, or we're not on Studio A anymore, are we? Kansas, Dorothy, we're not in Studio A anymore. Studio B, and you can scroll down to the time slot, which is 8 p.m. Eastern time right now on Saturday. Click on the thumbnail, and there's a huge back page there that has information about me and Kelsey and websites and contact information, and we do not accept any kind of hate mail. So if you're going to hate on us, don't bother. Go find somebody else to hate on. All right, so so how has your week been this week? Anything interesting or unusual?
Well, I suppose with Mars coming out of retrograde, I had a pretty good day yesterday. I feel like yesterday just felt fantastic. I think the highlight of my week, I have an iPhone that I had invested in the first round of the COVID chump change. And I lost it after a couple of months, and I thought it was long gone, right? But I found it after 7 months. I found it. So I just feel like as far as technology goes, I can start to catch up with things. But this last week went by really fast. Picked up a couple new clients. I don't know where the time went. But yeah. I don't know. That was my week.
I think it's probably Mars moving forward probably was helpful.
Maybe. That seems to be the general theme that keeps coming forward.
Yeah, because it's been in Aries for quite a long time. And I think finally will end around Thanksgiving, and then it'll finally move on. But I think it's been there a really, really long time, several months maybe.
It feels like it, because my North Node is in Aries, so I feel like as far as all the general direction and where I'm going in life, it's just been constant struggle. But I feel like things are starting to just magically move forward, or things that are stuck are starting to shift a little. So I'm trying to be more open to that, I guess. And just the thought of, you know what I've been meditating on a lot this week, or another thing that has been coming up is why does really like crappy stuff happen to good people, and why is it that like really bad people can have some seemingly good things happen to them?
Or maybe everything crappy happens and people are just good at pretending that their lives are so great and they just make it up and it's not even true.
Right. Like trying to shift in between the realities, because it's all on the same spectrum, like the good and the bad, and if you're out of judgment of it all, like none of it really matters anyway.
Yeah, the only thing that matters is what you feed.
Right.
Whichever you focus your energy or attention into. And I kind of like a really unusual week, but I think it was good on a lot of levels. I think I could shed like a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm just working on trying to incorporate more time for myself in the equation, and where can I pull that time from, and so just kind of working on that and just really trying to focus my mindset quite a bit.
Well, that's good. I hope like more energy too, and you're putting more energy into yourself, because you dedicate a lot of time and energy into other people.
Yeah, well, I think other people are a mirror to yourself, so so I think it is good to do both, but also to see what mirroring's going on like outside of yourself and your issues and problems, and helping to clear up other people's stuff, so it kind of helps you to focus in on your stuff and clear it up too. But it's been a pretty crazy week. I've been praying for kind of more energy and power to kind of get up over some of these big hurdles. And like I put out the blog today, I had that crazy, I woke up and there was this crazy light being on the wall this morning, and I'm calling it the crystalline octopus light being, but it had these huge tendrils of light that came off the top of its head and then came off the bottom, and it was just an incredible thing. And it kind of, I had to jump out of bed because it was so shocking. At first I thought, oh, look what the light's doing on the wall, and then I had to take a couple more looks at it, and then I jumped up and turned my tablet on so I could take a photo of it, because I was just so like, whoa, this is a light form, and I should take a picture of it. So it was kind of a good sign. It was showing me that they're listening, the good spirits are listening, and
for you too,
and they're responding. So that's really important to me. Keeps me, kind of the stuff that keeps me going. The doody.
You call them in.
Well, what else has been going on? So did you get new clients for doing art or therapy, or what you got?
Counseling stuff, which has been fun. Well, it's always like I get to put my psychology skills to use, and getting to apply like creative aspects to it's pretty fun too. And then trying to incorporate like more of the intuitive skills, or like I like oracle cards and things and tarot cards and stuff, and I know they have a lot of stigmas attached to them and a lot of like funky stuff, but I like the creative applications to it. And I did a live reading on Facebook just before this to just try to like tap in and channel into stuff. And I don't know, I always feel kind of funky like getting into the collective and doing general stuff and staying very open to like vast archetypes. But I'm just as shocked by like the responses and the feedbacks that come from it. So it's always interesting to like trust the process, like in the intuitive process, and getting to, I don't know, just connect to people one-on-one. It's nice that, I guess, like the post-COVID stuff, I feel like my purpose has more energy to it. So just like settling into that, and I just feel like with different phases, just like what is it that I want to feed next, and like trying to figure out like where to take business stuff, like what steps are next and what phases are next. It's a fun spot to be in, I think, as far as creativity goes, especially. because the potentials and like the outcomes are kind of infinite. But I guess this is where like manifestation comes into play, and like being very careful about words and the types of things that I'm trying to bring into reality, or like the co-creative aspect part of consciousness, I think is really neat too. So I don't know, just being more open to things.
Me too. Just paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
I think doing a lot of that, and then just a lot of the reading I'm doing through some yogi books and old, like 15th century stuff from yogis, and just, how they talk about, the witness, taking, which in the native teachings that I've had would be like more of the balance, being in balance, being careful about what side you feed, right?
Mm-hmm.
What side you interact with. And sometimes it just doesn't really need any kind of interaction, because the thing is, I think sometimes people think people believe like, we're moving to like the fifth dimension and all this other stuff. And I think that there's a lot of, mental illness out there. I was talking to somebody who was saying today that they can't, they're kind of asleep at the wheel, where they're not really doing a whole lot physically, but they have like this whole, like reality kind of happening in their head. Like they feel like they live in, their mental fantasy. Not something that would be actually, they're not mentally ill or schizophrenic or anything like that, but they don't really know how to like step out of it, to like just so that they can just stop sleeping and stop, going to bed all the time as a coping skill, and that letting their mind kind of run. I always think about, a lot of the new age stuff and a lot of stuff that's out there that, kind of is talked about. And, the fact is that, rapture, which the Christian Bible talks about, is the same thing as what the new age people talk about, what they call ascension. And then, some of my native teachers talk about the great harvest, which is like a period when the ETs come back and, take a lot of humans off the planet. And we're not so sure what that means. And I think it's interesting that people will just make stuff up, like that this rapture could be a good thing. Well, did you ever stop to think about, under normal circumstances, how would people, float in their bodies from the ground up to the sky? Well, then we have like, the mainstream, extraterrestrial abductions where they're going in a tractor beam, right? The tractor beam pulls them up to the sky. So it's interesting to me, like people that are, highly religious and biblical, and, they're waiting for this rapture as a sign. And, and then you have these other people, the ascension people, that want to have like this dual planet experience. And then all the bad people can just stay on the old Earth planet. And somehow there's going to be this separation of this new Earth planet where all the good people will go on there. But with that kind of thinking, who made the rules about who's good and who's bad? Sounds like a Santa Claus kind of thing. So, maybe you can get on the old St. Nick's list and I guess decide what side you're going to go on. I think, with, I think more than likely what's going to happen is that, the last 4 years, the sun is moving into a heightened, and a lot of people believe that it's going to nova, which means like it'll obliterate anything within its general vicinity. And I think that's probably more kind of closer to the fact of something that would happen.
It's interesting to think of like what would happen with consciousness then in that sense. Or like it just makes me think of these like light beings as like your light octopus that came to visit. Or, like just the radical acceptance of what do you even do, or how do you even conceptualize something like that? It can be very challenging, and I think that's why people check out and kind of go into zombie mode, because trying to fathom all the possibilities of what could be is tough, and it's painful in a lot of different ways, and it can be very overwhelming. And I think it can be a lot easier for people to dissociate. It's a coping mechanism for people just to kind of go off into their own la-la land. If there's not a whole lot of general threat in their environment, they go on autopilot. If there's no challenge.
And the sad thing is that we don't really have a lot of threat in the U.S. We don't have bombs falling from the sky for hundreds of years. We don't have, at least not yet, we don't have our government sick in the military and just annihilating civilians with weapons. At least, and that's the thing about disassociation in the United States and how frail, like, people are on so many levels. It's like we haven't really been through. I mean, maybe the last really harsh thing was like the Great Depression, but I mean, that's nothing in comparison to some countries that literally other bigger countries have waged war on them for 200-300 years, constant.
Yeah. Just the horrible, awful things that certain types of tribes, groups of people, cultures have had to go through in the history of mankind to get us to where we are today. It's some pretty dark stuff.
Yeah, and I wonder, like if stuff does start getting really harsh, which there's a pretty good scenario coming to the U.S., of some pretty crazy stuff that's going to be happening. And if people, disassociate over not very much stress, you think, well, a lot of these people are just going to freak out and they're going to drown themselves and drown their children. And, like you could probably see lots of, suicide, especially if people can't go back to, and this is the other thing too, it's the addiction. So they have this looping behavioral stuff going on where, they have one form of addiction or another. Shopping can be an addiction, hoarding. I see it a lot, with the homeless, when they, fully crack and they, have a tendency to go through garbage cans and hoard garbage just so that they have something,
Yeah.
and, people hoard animals. They, there's so many things that people are addicted to, working out, eating certain kinds of foods. I think about like, okay, what if you kind of had to be on the fly and you didn't really know what the course of your day was going to be like, and you didn't really know, what you were going to eat. And, I've been pretty much homeless since 2006. Some of it's been worse than other parts, but one of the biggest things that it did was it opened me up to having to kind of be more on the fly, when I had my van, having, to find safe places to park it, like at night and stuff like that. And just, what I was going to get for food. Not that I've really ever gone hungry, but, having a willingness to eat a lot more different things, have like a bigger diversity in my diet, and not be so opposed to things, like I hear a lot from people, I don't like that, I don't this and I don't that, because their addiction that they're still addicted to of what, that's how they kind of want to live. So I think, well, what happens when we have this massive food shortage and people can't get, that Big Mac anymore? And what's going to happen? People can't get their, daily. Well, I used to call the tie the mind-body split. Put the tie on and split the mind from the body. And, the Big Mac is like goes right in the mouth. It's like the giant mind-body split. I eat it, and it's like, and I think that they make a lot of this food that creates chemical reaction in people, that's like heroin.
Well, that makes sense. It throws their hormones off a lot. We talk a lot about nutrition and how the things that we eat have an impact on us on this very subtle molecular level, and how it plays into our other senses, and we take a lot of that for granted. But it doesn't surprise me that a lot of that synthetic stuff just tunes people out. It turns them into robots, and so it creates that divide.
Yeah. Yep. It sure does. So this is kind of a funny story. So I want to make moxibustion, and so I've been looking for the last year for a recipe. And I want to do it right, because, moxibustion would be, Oriental, it'd be like under Oriental medicine.
I have no idea what it is. What is it?
Well, I'm going to read kind of a definition here about it so people know what it's kind of used for. But so I bought a new book because I saw moxibustion in there, and it was talking about all the stuff. But the problem is I went back to the book. This happens to me all the time. I went back to the book, and I couldn't find any of the stuff that I read, because I do that. Like, I'll be looking for information, and if I come close to the information, I'll read it in a book that it was never in that book, but it came through dimensionally. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of a weird thing. So I went back through here, and I couldn't find the actual, what it was talking about, how it needs to be made, because I want to make it, as authentic as possible. And here, we don't have Chinese mugwort growing along the river, but we have tons of regular mugwort, beautiful mugwort. I actually did a whole bunch of mugwort in my, I have a medic salve that I made this year that's fantastic. If people want to buy some, I can send them to you. It's just beautiful salve, and it has some mugwort in it, and has sagebrush and horsetail and flowering peppermint, all wild plants, and in a beautiful salve. So oil with some beautiful local beeswax that has propolis and pollen still in it. Yeah, it's awesome stuff. Mugwort is just, I smoke a lot of it too. I harvest and dry it, and I smoke it. It's part of my herbal cigarettes.
It's such a neat looking plant too.
Yeah, it can be a little bit dangerous though. It can be a little bit if it's used in the wrong way, because a lot of Native people have been using it for long periods of time for ceremony and just lots of different things, kind of like smudge. You can dry it and use it as smudge. You can also use it raw and tie it up in lodge, and then you put it in the bucket with the water, and then you're splashing it onto the hot rocks. Use it that way. There are a lot of different things. But I really fell in love with it last summer in my herbal outdoor wildcrafting herbal program. Just really fell in love with it. So I want to make moxibustion out of it. So this is what it is. Let me find the little piece, because it explains it pretty well. Let's see. Here it is. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. A related technique, moxibustion, entails the application of heat from a certain burning substances at the acupuncture points. The primary moxa, or heating substance, is mugwort. The action of the needles or of the moxibustion affects the qi and blood in the meridians, thus affecting all the substances and organs. So basically, moxibustion has kind of a few different, traditional ways that I've seen it. Sometimes they have these little long incense sticks, right, that you can kind of actually put on the actual meridian point that you're dealing with. I've used, moxibustion smoke and cupping, throw a little smoke in there and then suction cut the cup on to the back or, wherever the adhesion is. And then sometimes they have these little teeny little platforms, these little like moxibustion nougats that you can just set, you light and then they smolder and you set on just the different little acupuncture points on the body, or the ones that you're really trying to heat up and clear. And, it can be really effective with pain. So you can use it in exchange for acupuncture needles, and you can also use it along with acupuncture needles. And it's also something that, your clients can take home and use on themselves. It's super easy. You just show them how to do it and they can do it. So I've been wanting to so when I picked up this book, I could have sworn I saw the recipe for making it traditionally. I even read through part of it. So I was like, oh, I got the book at, it's an Oriental medicine book. I got it for $1 over at Goodwill. And so then I brought it home and then I realized, no, that wasn't in here. But one of the things I read was that it has to go through 7. So you have to get the mugwort, then you have to dry it. And then it has to go through a complete of 7 summers in the sun before you can wrap it up really tight and create like an incense or a burning, nougat or a long sticky thing. And I was like, wow, because it has a lot to do with the power of the sun and the energy of that sun coming into the plant. So even though it's dried, it still has to go through 7 summers of light, direct sun exposure before it's ready to be, put into a moxibustion tool. Is that wild?
That's quite the process.
Yeah. So I think about, but there's one thing I like about herbal medicine is it doesn't matter if I'm studying anthroposophy herbal medicine, biodynamics, Asian herbal medicine. There's this thing that I really dig, which is like compounding medicines, right? I really dig the whole idea of compounding medicines. For example, when I was going to do tinctures last summer, I had to find a medium for that. And I decided, what I could get. Obviously, someday when I have my own farm, I'm going to grow things to distill. I'll have my own corn. I'll have probably some of, my own barley. I'll have vinegars. I'll probably make my own vodka from, different things, potatoes, corn, whatever. But I decided on what I could get on the market was potato vodka from Poland, because I needed to drive the plant medicine down into the person. And I kind of thought, well, the potato is a lot more grounded, right? Instead of giving them like, a corn vodka, and I forget some of the other kinds of vodkas and what they're made from, but they would be like, take the medicine way kind of in the ether above. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to heal the body, right? So the other thing too is by this compounding medicine, I can actually make the medicine early on when I first start to either drive it into the body or drive it into the ether field or drive it into the astral field. And then using that compounding medicine. So by the choice of the medium that I'm going to use to put the actual medicines in. And so I like that whole compounding thing. How do I benefit the medicine and even make it better and drive it, a little bit harder in the direction that needs to go into.
Well, it seems like the compounds too, you can create blends that are specific to different individuals. Or like you said, that feedback on like the seasonal needs and seasonal environments too.
Yeah, but this is the thing with herbal medicine at least the kind that I do, there's only so much in the environment every year. So sometimes I'm limited, like I might not be able to make the same medicines every year. And whatever I collect, it takes a minimum of 2 to 3 months to cure. And then I have a product, but I only have a little bit of that product because I can't kill the ecosystem. I have to leave whatever 75% there. So if there's only a little bit, then I might not be able to actually harvest that medicine this year. Like even this year, my pain salve changed. So in the past, I've used, some other pain medicines. So this year, there was a lot of St. John's wort, so I got that, wild St. John's wort. And then I also got to harvest cottonwood buds this year for pain. So, it took a long time for those to cure up in the oil before I could actually, make a salve out of them. So I think if you're buying herbal plants, you probably could, if you were buying bulk herbs, dried herbs, you could make more, concoctions for people. I know that Michael Moore, herbalist, he was really into doing powdered herbs, and then he would pour the vodka over them with this really slow drip, so people could come back, the next day and get their tincture instead of, he hadn't harvested yet, so, it wouldn't be ready for another 3 months, right, if it was a raw plant. But if you bought it in bulk, then he could do. But the other thing, too, is like you lose 80% of the plant when it's dried. You're only getting like 25% out of it. And you're only getting, like hard, solid substances. You won't, because it's not fresh and just picked. So you're losing ether. You might be losing some astral energy. So you might be losing some of this, other really important, valuable medicines, which, if you get them raw and you cure them yourself, you don't lose any of it. Like things like an astral thing, would be, Steiner talks about this, that, the bugs and the birds help to move astral energy around the plants, because the plants will have this astral energy, but it needs to be moved around and shared. And so not only are they pollinating, but they're actually getting energy on them, different types of astral energies from different plants, and they're also moving that around as data and information and communication, right, through plants and animals and insects. So if I didn't, like, for example, when I harvested that flowering peppermint, that, oh my God, when I was walking up the trail in this little marsh area, I could smell it. It was so incredible. And bees and everybody was, crazy, like mad hatters on it. And you could smell it from down the trail in the heat of the summer. And so by collecting it, I got all that other energy that was happening at that moment. And then that gets infused into the oil as well, or, the tincture or whatever else it's going to be. So when I make medicines, I don't always have a lot of medicine left over. Once I'm done my salves in the fall, as soon as the last jar is sold, which usually there's not many, people know to buy in bulk because, they won't be able to get it till next fall, like my pain salve. But I think, for me, I want to deal with the fresh plant. And I really like smoking dried herbs. Like I collect a lot of herbal plants to smoke. And that's one thing that I would do with them, or use them in ceremony, or, smudge them out. But I really prefer to ingest. Like if I'm going to ingest, I'd really prefer to ingest a live plant, that was captured live, into an alcohol or something like that for a tincture, for sure.
The raw foods just seem to have so much more living energy to them, just more body to them as a whole. Or even, I saw what this makes me think of is I saw an interesting, I guess, fact today that there are people who can smell ants. And so, like, to think, and like certain people that can't, but if there are like all these different dimensions and levels of, how do you want to put it? I'm sorry, I feel so distracted. I feel like it's like it all ties into like the various sensations that we have and all the different information that we're taking in at different levels and processing and then trying to convey, I guess it's relevance. Hang on a second. Hang on. I need 5 minutes. Hold on.
Okay. She must be having something going on in the background there. All right. Well, I'll talk. So I'm going to be, I'm thinking about giving some classes coming up after January or maybe in January, if anyone is interested, some shamanism classes. And if I get interest, then I'll put them together and I'll have dates for them if I don't get any interest. So, make sure you go to our back page and shoot me an email if you're interested. I'm going to be teaching, I'd actually like to share this teaching. It came from one of my Lakota Sioux medicine teachers, a woman that I studied with when I was 23 for a year, who greatly impacted my life in such incredible ways. One of the tools that she taught me was called screening. And it's something that not a lot of people were trained in by her, specifically a energy tool system that's really cool. And then I branched out, well, I'll be 52 in December. So over the last, I don't know how many years it's been, quite a few, almost 30, I've branched out and I've added netting as another tool and kind of like what I use it for. So there's kind of like the beginner, teachings, and then you come back and do the more advanced teachings. I think I do it in the like 4 classes. So, and if anybody's interested in taking that class, it'd be pretty affordable classes. So if anybody's interested, let me know. But I would really like to pass on the information and teach people something that I don't really have anybody to pass on to. So, and it would give you guys really great tools and skills on how to work in the energetic fields. And you can use your right and left hemisphere. It's super creative work. It's also super technical work, so it actually really helps with that whole brain function, which causes great big healing. So anyway, if you're interested, just shoot me an email and we'll go from there. So anyway, yeah. So yeah.
Are you putting your class schedule together for 2021 then?
No, I'm just I know I haven't really been doing any online classes. No, I'm just going to do the screening and netting class. And it was training that I got when I was 23 from a Lakota Sioux medicine woman, working on energetic levels and layers and using specific techniques. And then I've added netting onto it over the last 30 years as I've developed the whole thing. And I really would like to teach it to people. So maybe people will get a hold of me, kind of a little bit more advanced, kind of shamanic, multi-dimensional type, healing arts, but easy to learn. But I would like to actually teach it. So people know what it is, because I'm it. The teaching ends with me. So if I die, it'll never go anywhere.
It's a helpful skill to have, or at least to understand things, or to like have these sort of tools within the toolkit. Because I think, especially when you're confronted with or having to deal with like the really, really difficult stuff, knowing how to work within all the different dimensions, or like understanding how things like play out within all these different levels really helps to like cut out that dissociation and bring things into present time and give you like a sense of empowerment. But I think it just does so much more good for like the physical world that we're in. And it would be great if like we could shift the gears like collectively into healing things at large. Because you're right, there's just not, this stuff isn't taught very often, and there aren't a whole lot of people who have this information like you, Bridgette. So it's helpful to find the different avenues and like ways to get that out. And technology is cool because we can get things out that way. But then we get the weird politics within technology that help to manipulate a lot of that information too.
Yeah.
But it's there.
Well, yeah. And a lot of it has to do with like, I'm not putting out classes anymore and spending all the time developing it all, and then not have people show up for the class, because I could charge very little for people to do it, but it doesn't help me if if you don't show up. I have to have somebody to teach it to. So that's the important function of the whole thing. But I would like to teach some of the things that I know. For a while there, I thought maybe some of it might be obsolete. And now I'm realizing, like, it should be foundationally taught if people want to believe in any kind of, multi-dimensional type stuff, or ascension, or any of this stuff. Like, we should get to the grassroots of systems. And another thing too is like there has, like a native ceremony is a technology, right? It activates, energy fields. So, like a native drum, just depending on what the design is a piece of technology. I had a friend of mine who she was Metis, so she was, taught from medicine people, but she herself was white. But she went on to teach, people for 27 years. I remember I was at her property in 2014 camping, and she came out, and the grandmother moon was rising, and she brought me a drum, and she said, "Hey, we're going to sing, different songs on the different frequency levels on the wheel, on the medicine wheel." And these are the feminine ones, right? Because they're done towards the grandmother moon. So we ended up going through all of the different song frequencies based on the tone of your voice and the sound of the drum. And she kind of started, teaching me about that kind of a technology, and it's interesting, like how people, they talk a lot about cymatics, and they talk about a lot of this other stuff, like they're reinventing the wheel. But indigenous people have known all of this stuff forever. And we never really go to them, and we never really ask them, and it totally shocks me. But it's all technology. It's all multidimensional, energetic technology that can be used, solid, multidimensionally. It probably has some kind of coding, universally. It could just be all kinds of different levels, but it's technology. And I think people get away from the fact that your brain is a piece of technology, and how your body works and the chemistry of it is a piece of technology. And then how to make it all work, and with like a simple piece of technology like screening. where you use different kinds of screens that you develop to clear out certain types of fields. For example, one of the women who also was involved with my teacher back 30 years ago took this screening work, and she was this amazing, like, elfin person. She could get anything to grow anywhere. And her yard was like a jungle, that she would have to hack back. It was just really, really incredible to see how she developed this yard and the animals and beings and everything that would come. Well, these really awful people moved in next door that had all these drug parties, and they were up all the time and just loud. And so all of a sudden her yard had this really negative reaction towards it, and it got a couple bugs, like like a plague of bugs, and she couldn't get rid of it, and they were killing these certain types of bugs, or like killing her plants. I mean, she had a whole host of stuff like aphids and this kind of bug and that kind of bug, and it was just totally destroying her yard. It was just kind of really interesting to see that. Not so importantly was it the imbalance in the solid world, but there was this really heavy imbalance in the energy field. So she ended up using this screening technique over her yard every day for 30 days, and she ended up getting rid of every single bug energetically.
That's impressive.
And they didn't come back. So she wasn't forced to kill them or murder them or, do anything like that. It was more kind of a dissolving and returning the balance. So, I mean, you have these types of healing tools that I think a lot of people don't know about, and that, could be taught, because, we are technology, we are machines, and we can change a lot of things if we just know how to. We just know kind of what to do.
What do you think prevents people from wanting to get to that point?
Ego, that they think that they know everything.
The lower vibrations and...
No, just like no vibration.
That too. Nobody's home.
Yeah, and then they, make stuff up, or... and I don't think they also realize, like, it's a really huge responsibility, to do a lot of this type of work and healing work, because, you're responsible for, for a lot of different things. And I don't think people think about that. I mean, like, for a long time, I haven't seen anything like this in a while, but for like about 5 years, everybody was into having these, ceremonies where they opened up portholes and all kinds of crazy stuff. And it was kind of like groups kind of forming out of Burning Man. And I just, think like, well, why would you do something like that? Because you don't really understand what you're doing, and you don't understand what you're dealing with, and your ego, and whatever kind of friends that you're talking to that maybe are leading you to this, whether they're solid friends or in your mind friends. All these beings, even good beings, have agendas, and we have to, be responsible for, like the things that we do. I spend more time usually, when I'm out and about, closing down portholes than reopening them. And I think it's a lot of it is because people are not really trained properly. And they have big egos, and they're not really respectful, of themselves or the environment or other people or energies or other beings. Then they lead to consequences that aren't so positive. So I always try to, like, make sure that, I overly err on the side of caution, and make sure I teach people their part in it and their responsibility of it. And so that, what is that? Remember that statement, that motto, if I give a guy a fish, I'll have to keep giving him fish. But if I give him a fishing pole and teach him how to fish, then he can go get his own fish.
Right. I'd like to teach or start out my art classes with responsibility too, because I think even when it comes to subtle things like what it is that you're creating, just to be full on aware that when you create something, you have you have this important impact on the collective conscious and the way that we all think and perceive, and it affects people in such a subtle way in that unconscious level, because it starts feeding into those archetypes and these different energies, and it can send a lot of confused and mixed messages. And when you're aware that anytime you create something, or you put down symbols, or you create music or harmonies and frequencies and sounds, it's having an impact on everything around you. So you must be cognizant of what it is that you're creating. And then the responsibility, I think, comes to knowing, I guess, how to help heal and support life and humanity. And I think I get really picky and choosy about words here, because I don't like to go into that the divisive language of the good versus evil, although those things are important. But how do you, I guess when it comes to energetic levels, be able to discern what is the inner worth or the inner self? Because I guess that's the inner truth of knowing who you are. Because if you're all ego, or if you're not home, I think there would have to be either a lack of consciousness or just a conscious understanding that there's this vast whole, or that there's an entity that lives outside of the meat suit, but it allows a pathway for other entities to drive it too.
Yeah, I still, dip my toe into disassociative, behaviors. And one of the things that I've been noticing, we have a break in 2-3 minutes, but that shocks me is that usually when people have the dissociative behavior disorder, where they have fractured personalities or split personality disorder, and then they go into disassociation in between, they'll stop. It looks like they had a mini stroke or something. They'll stare at something and then, snap in something else. I'm totally shocked about how modern disassociatives not only know all of their personalities by name and what they do and their behaviors, but they're cognitively aware of them, living under one roof. Where I don't remember in the past, most people who, were going into integrative work didn't really know, the main driver didn't really know all the different personalities and wasn't really aware of them all. I mean, so that's been a huge change. And so I was thinking about, does that mean that therapists have pushed people to that, encouraged it maybe? Or is that kind of the more modernized version, where you have the driver, the main person of the bus, who is just a little bit more conscious, but also, when these other personalities take over, there's a disassociation. That person's not always available to know what that person's doing. And in this one video, she was talking about how she'll leave notes on her iPhone. So every personality, I think there was 7. She had 7 splits, all know to go to the iPhone and to look at the notes. Right. So all the different splits are, this is their main way of being able to communicate, is by iPhone, and leaving notes for the other ones in case, there so many are shifting in and shifting out. Some of them, if you're driving a car and you split into one who doesn't know how to drive a car, that could be a problem. anyway, it was like lately I've been re-looking into dissociative disorders, and I think it's like, I mean, and it seems like there's so many people that have some kind of branch of dissociative disorder. And so how do we drive the ship called the USA? How do we drive the planet? If everybody is not only just asleep, but are switching in and out of different personalities that live kind of in different framework. But anyway, we should talk about that after the break. Something to think about.
I think so too. Yeah, because channeling has always intrigued me and fascinated me, and how to like get into, take under control like the aspects, bringing in different levels, or like when is it socially accepted?
Break.
Okay.
Break. We'll be back. Hold that thought. All right. The gruesome twosome is back. No, just kidding.
Back from my break already.
Yeah. So, 4 ways to donate. We got Patreon. You give a little once a monther. I even donated today. Yes, I did. I wish I could donate more regularly, but I can only do what I can do. And I use the method of the ATM card. So you can go to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and check out the donation button. And, we got Patreon, we got Zazzle. I was even laughing. I was going to see how much the mugs are. I was going to, if I could afford it, buy a few of them. I'm going to give them to people, with our little thumbnail logo on it. I thought that would just be funny.
It would make good Christmas presents.
It just would be funny. Or we have a shirt on and people be like, oh, is that a good show? Yeah, it's mine. It is as good as mine.
It would be fun to design a t-shirt.
Yeah, so all kinds of different ways. Snail mail if you're old-fashioned, or you're down to just, checks and money orders, which, some of us are going back to. And, or, a little ATM card, Zazzle, or Patreon. So lots of ways to support us. Wintertime is always a little bit tougher coming into the holidays, and so we could really use your support. And also with all the other political stuff, you definitely don't want to lose Revolution Radio coming into the future. So it would be something, that would be really, really bad. Losing something where, it's one of the only places where everybody's allowed to say whatever they want to say. Every host has a different show, has a different point of view, has different education, has different feelings, and we're kind of an anomaly. And sometimes it does explode into fights between hosts because there is so much difference. But we just kind of have to agree that. A
well-rounded family.
Yeah, that's true. Probably, yeah. Okay, so I always think about. I see a lot of people go into dissociative moments quite a bit, actually, more and more lately, where they'll just be standing there staring, in the grocery store at something. And, or, just all different kinds of places. But I think I had such kind of a hard life that, I was taking care of myself and my little sister when I was little. And I just didn't have time to disassociate. Even though I had really horrible, things happen to me during the course of my life. But both of my parents worked like full-time jobs. We were extremely poor. So, I had to stay home, then sometimes late at night. And very rarely did, we have babysitters. And my little sister was like 3 years younger than me, so I was responsible for taking care of her. And, sometimes I had to clean the house and mow the lawn and take care of the dog and cook meals, so when my parents got home. And I got to do a lot of, things that I wanted to do. I was kind of a terrorist too. But, I think because of how I was raised that there wasn't any time for me to disassociate because everything was always kind of like emergency level. Like you have to stomp that fire out like right now. Like you can't go to sleep, you can't check out. So even though I think I've never really been fully like even chronically depressed in my life. Like I'll be like, oh, I think I'm depressed, and I'll sleep a little bit more. But by day 2, I'm like totally bored. I'm like, okay, now what? So I guess I don't really understand. I've had rape. I've had lots of things that have happened to me in my life, but I've never disassociated. Like I've always been conscious of everything that's happened. So I think, sometimes, I think sometimes, I don't really understand, I guess kind of like the more new age and modern dissociative syndrome, behavioral.
Well, I think that's where we have to get clear on like what the words are specifically, or what the diagnostic criteria are for it, because there's different levels of dissociating and different levels of like being conscious of that. Because like within schizophrenia, a person can be full on aware of different memories and can like recall various bits and pieces from different timelines through different personalities. But then you have like through narcissistic personality disorders where there's dissociation that happens, but there's also like a lack of memory, or there's no recall in what happens. So the dissociation happens kind of in like a moment by moment sort of thing, where like the underlying personality is somewhat similar, but there's like these different wings that come off that aren't even aware of each other at all. And I think they sort of synthesize under what we would call more the ego. But then you have these odd phenomena like schizophrenia that are tied to or linked to things that are similar to like the psychic channelings, or like through trance mediumships, where you get persons who can access different types of personalities, whether they be real, imagined, past, present, future, and then channel them into a distinct being, where they sort of set their own ego aside and allow another entity or ego or being to like manifest through them. So I'm not really sure, like when it comes to like the different levels of dissociation, how that happens. Or I think it's really interesting within the realm of creative people or artists who access information, who access their creative channels by these dissociative means, where they sort of like kick themselves out in a way and allow other things to synthesize and flow through them, and then they manifest it, or they've created this thing without really having any like conscious awareness or memory of doing so. So it shows up in different levels, but I think it depends on what lens we're looking at it from and from what dimension.
Well, old school, I'm kind of old school. We would call it possession.
Well, I was going to say that too, because you and I have talked a little bit about like the poltergeists as well, like the aspects of how these different like manifestative like dark energies can come through. But would that be separate then from a dissociative disorder, or like are poltergeists and these sort of like entities embodying persons or working outside of the person the same?
Well, I mean, I think I kind of lump it all into kind of one little piece, which is for me, and having been trained old school and having a lot of native medicine people who probably were like a little bit more on the light. I mean, there are some shamanic and medicine people who are a little bit on the dark side. That's just some place I've been trained to never go. Never give anything or anyone any ever kind of permission to take me over in any kind of way. And in shamanism, and a lot of the shamanism I've studied, being fully present is like a really huge thing. So say, for example, I'm in a situation where, I've never been frightened to death so much than some of the training I've had in shamanism. I've never been so terrified out of my complete mind at some of the things I've seen and some of the things that I've witnessed, or even in situations thought I witnessed. And also that my brain just, would have to be shocked and shocked and shocked and shocked again, so that I stayed completely awake, stayed completely in control, and stayed completely conscious during, these types of events. And, some of them are really, really intense. Like when I was working with the Lakota Sioux medicine woman, I'm not going to give her name because I haven't seen her in a long time, and she did not give me permission to, give her name out publicly. But, when I first started working with her, it was me and a woman who'd been helping her, which is a grounder. She grounded the body of the person that would get worked on. And then she had me come in and start taking notes, because we would take notes of the 3-hour sessions that went on. And they were all like multi-dimensional. So, the people were heavily worked on energetically. We got a lot of people who, unfortunately, were channelers, and channeling most beings are not good beings. If it's grandiose and, they've got to make themselves important and really light, they'll always target people who are a little bit weaker, who need to have some kind of power or ego. And then once they connect more and more in with these things and give them more and more permission, they're pretty much hard to get rid of, and they all start to take over. So we had gotten a lot of those kind of people, and we had to do like removal, actually surgical, like energetic removal. And then we'd have to battle with some of these things to help the people so that they didn't reattach or didn't attach to something else or someone else. But the whole key with like the type of shamanism that I've studied is so that you are fully conscious all the time, even when you're asleep. You're fully conscious of everything that's going on, and you control and navigate it. There's never a period where you just check out, ever. And in my training, even though I have done dreaming medicines, I have done, like peyote and the DMT with the lantern DMT in ceremony. I don't do any of this stuff unless it's ceremonial. Like it has to have a medicine person present, and it has to go through the whole ceremonial stuff. And the medicines have to be created by medicine people who understand those medicines and the spirits that live in those medicines. So for me, it's like, it's a pretty, I'm really strict about that stuff, but most of my teachers have advised me not to take those kinds of medicines. Because it can destroy you, and it can make things hard on you. And you can separate pieces of yourself, so you have gaps where other things can come in and fill them, right? So to always learn how to do everything soberly, so that once you learn how to do it, you can redo it. You don't need anything to help you do it, right? And I think it's a little bit longer process. It's more of a lifetime process, but at least I don't have to rely on anything or anyone in order to do, some of those work, or if I want to travel. But I mean, when you have things like, for example, you're in a ceremony and you have a powerful shamanic person, and they're literally there standing right next to you, then you're staring right at them, they disappear, then they reappear over, in the field. Your mind takes blows because your mind is not used to dealing with that kind of stuff, so you just want to shut down. So when I was first working with this medicine woman when I was 23, she had to clobber the crap out of me because I would just get so emotionally kind of overboard that I would just check out. Sometimes I just faint. I just like black out because of, the things that are going on. And I remember there was this particular situation. I'm sitting at the table. So once the door's shut and we have the person that we're working on for whatever reason, then we have another person that grounds that body. Then my teacher would work on all the levels of that body. And then I would be over in the corner taking notes because both of the people would be telling me things about the person and then I would be taking notes. I'd take 3 hours of notes of different things going on with the body and what was corrected and this, that, or whatever. So one time there was this huge energetic being that, it started off with electricity. Like I could feel like electricity running through my whole body, like my hair, even the hair on my body was like electrified, magnetic. And I started getting really cold, and it was almost like somebody had turned on a giant fan above me, and this cold air was circulating around me. Well, my brain was having a really hard time because I'm looking around trying to figure out, like, the window's not open. I'm not close to the window. I don't see wind out there. There's no storm. And I'm trying to figure this stuff on my own because, we're in a session, right? And I'm not allowed to leave the room, right? Once the door is shut, we don't open the door and get out until the session's over, until everything's cleared, everything's backgrounded. And I just remembered like me feeling just kind of funny about whatever was going on because it was so it was super do-do, 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 do-do. It was like super duty. And it was like, something was majorly getting ready to happen. So what happened is that even though I know that I'm not supposed to go near the door and I'm not supposed to open the door and I'm not supposed to leave, there was something inside of me that was so terrified about what was going on that I literally crawled off the chair, and on my way crawling to that door, I fainted because it was so intense, right? The whole thing was so intense. And what I found out later was that it's a particular being that my teacher used to work with, right? A good being, a real light being, but it has a lot of power and it has a lot of energy. But it scared the holy hoo-hoo out of me. So much so that I tried to run and I just fainted. So for me, like a lot of the, spiritual teachings and the work that I do and have done has been around a lot of breaking, any kind of dissociative behavior that I may have had, any way, shape, or form. Because, you can't really travel into other worlds and deal with other beings because they all have agendas, good, bad, or indifferent. They all have agendas. And if you're not awake, even some of the best will use you in a way that you're probably not going to like, or you may not be comfortable with. It's just how higher intelligence is, right? If you're not going to take personal responsibility, then, the being will, right? If it's conscious enough.
It makes sense of why a lot of people dissociate and check out, because it's so much to comprehend and it's so much to take in when you start working on that level.
Well, it's hard. Life is hard. I don't think that people tell other people that. I had a session today with a younger girl, and it's like, this is the stuff that you need to focus in on and do now, because by the time that you leave, your parents' house, and these are the things that physically you need to kind of have in order, because once you leave, things are going to get harder. You think things are harder, and you're depressed, and you're trying to find your path and all this other stuff. But, it's going to keep getting harder and harder and harder. And I don't think that it ever gets easier, but I think the mindset, especially in America, well, like if I work at this job for 30 years, I'll at least get a pension, and then I can do what I want. Well, usually by the time you're going to retire, you die.
Right, or just something can be pulled out from underneath you and just, I don't know, things can just suddenly change in the blink of the eye, and the oddest things can happen. You just can't necessarily foresee.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a long, strange trip,
Yeah.
And so I think that, people disassociate into lots of different things, like they just check out and stare at the wall, or they're checked out at the grocery store or driving down the road, or, they're checked out at their job. The other thing too is like, big checkout for me is, when I really started thinking about, in 2006, I was leaning towards buying a condo over in Collin Ranch. Thank God I didn't buy that thing. It went at the market that I was going to buy. It was like, because it was in the good area, it was like $360,000. And then it had like a couple $100 HOA a month. I'm so glad I didn't buy it, because when the market fell apart in 2008, it went down to like 50,000.
Jeez.
Yeah, I would have lost my total bungholio. But the other thing too is like, I had to really think about it too, because it's like, okay, so it's a 30-year loan.
Yeah.
So where am I going to be, and what am I going to be doing, and who am I going to be in 30 years? And so, I mean, even having a mortgage and paying that is kind of disassociative, because I don't think most people think 30 years. They're just happy that somebody's going to give them a loan, and then they sign their name to it. They don't even read what was on it.
No, it's a contract that locks you into a certain reality, so you have to maintain
that's
a certain pace.
That's it. And you have to check out, because the number one thing now you have in your life that you have this obligation is a 30-year mortgage. And the other thing is everything's locked up into it. Everything gets tied up into that mortgage.
Yeah. Your job, your business, your kids' school and education, neighbors, everything.
Everything gets locked up into it. Yeah.
I think that's the biggest reason why I've never bought a house, or never put my energy into it. It just doesn't. I can't picture myself being in the same place for 30 years.
Well, how do you? Yeah, I mean, like, how do you be spontaneous? Like, somebody invites you to come live to India for a year. I'm sorry, I'm only on my 15th year of my mortgage. I've got 25 more, I've got 10 more years or 15 more years to go, and then maybe I'll call you and see if I can still come to India.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's hard on the other side too. It's hard to, be homeless.
But to be so spontaneous all the time, because there isn't a solid reality to grasp onto, and there are so many different identities and roles to play. It's easy to get lost and to lose sense of who you are. It's, you don't plant roots necessarily.
Well, I mean, and all these other things that you're supposed to be able to depend on in this reality, you can't depend on at all. I mean, think about, like, for example, you were working a job, you were waitressing, and you're also self-employed before COVID, and you filed for all kinds of employment. There's self-employment, there's gig unemployment, there's job underemployment, and I mean, where are you at with all that? I mean, you still haven't even gotten a dollar. How many months ago did you file for that? And you're like completely ignored.
It's just months and months on top of that, and then on top of like just everything else in life. It's so challenging, and I just feel like I'm like a weird neutral middle ground, where like I'm not far enough to one end of any pole to really receive the sort of assistance, or like just things are very overlooked in a lot of ways, or dismissed, or things just fall very back onto social expectations or what the role is, or it's like, oh, you have a master's degree, this is what you should be doing. But the reality and the environment that I'm in is like, that's just not, things don't work that way. And I can pretend and I can project and portray one aspect of self, but then it doesn't necessarily resonate with what is authentic. But it's hard within the system to tie into it, because it's just a matter of time and energy, because like that falls apart, and then like home falls apart, and then car falls apart. If it's not one thing, and then it's another, and then like, losing a phone for 7 months, or like there's just been all kinds of odd things that have just not quite aligned, but then on another hand that they have. I don't know. But I always wonder when it comes to like the money part of it, or like money as vibration and like the material world. I've been able to get by, I guess, or to be able to live like live a lifestyle a certain way, something that's very nomadic and very creative, very grassroots, but just very, if I needed something, it appeared somehow, or I could put the energy into it, or the work towards it, or the opportunities would show up, and then I could take new opportunities and not have to be like full on locked into a goal, but then get kids locked into the play, and then you get like the like larger pandemic stuff locked into stuff. Becoming aware of like the system, or how like one fits in within the system, and what all that like leads to. It's been tricky, because there's been a lot of these resources that weren't brought to my attention until late, and then trying to do that on top of everything else. It's just been, I don't know, Bridgette. I have to get my real ID too, right? And then and to make an appointment for the DMV, but they're like 3 or 4 months booked out as far as appointments go.
Yeah, the whole thing is like all of it is just complete and total madness. But the thing is, like, Dr. Lenny and I talk a lot about this, the system really has to collapse, because it's really not a beneficial system. It's a very parasitic system. Like, even though I have gone to school, and like yourself, I have a huge education. I have a massive education, but it's the education, that I wanted to do and I wanted to develop. And I've paid cash for it all, because it wasn't a type of education where I could get a loan. Those things did not apply in my world.
Yes,
and
student loan traps. Those are.
Yeah. And I've got to make my own choices. I mean, and kind of my journey, but there's always this, and I think that's why I don't have a lot of friends, now. I don't really have a lot of friends from my past, because there was a certain point where they had frustration about their projection of where I should be at this point in my life, and that I wasn't there, and I really wasn't adhering to the, party line, of what we all do. And so there was a little bit of a fight, and at some point or another there was like a showdown on their part, and then we just weren't that great of friends anymore. And the projection of how I'm supposed to be living my life, like, why don't you have a mortgage? Well, I don't really want a mortgage. Well, why don't you have a relationship? Why aren't you married? Well, that's just not something that I've been interested in this far. Like, ideally, if I felt like I would have met the right person, and, he had everything, the things that I value and that are important, maybe I would have engaged in a relationship. But I don't, I haven't really run into that person. So I haven't really even considered dating or have a relationship in over 20 years now. And people are like shocked by that. But I think I'm so far removed now from any of that fairy tale paradigm of, most people are just so driven towards getting a partner and getting married, not really thinking about, all of those steps, and then everything that comes after it. So, I even had interventions at several of my friends who, God love them, chose to have relationships so that they didn't have to later on in their life go get careers. And were the people that they dated ideal? No. In some cases, one of my friends was completely disgusted by her partner, and he's a super good guy, but he had some hygiene issues. But he made money, he took really good care of her, let her have whatever she wanted and do, and then she ended up working for him and stuff, like part-time. But there's always this underlying weird issues because they didn't choose their life, and then they wanted to ride somebody else's wagon. And so I remember I went to dinner when I was like 40 to their house, and they were like, okay, you have to have security. And I well, I am. I go to school, work really hard, trying to figure out where I want to have my practice, and I want to have an apothecary, and I want to have my own little clinic, and all of this stuff later on, and just preparing for all of that stuff. And they're like, no, you need security, you need a person. It's like, and I'm like, but I have no interest. I haven't met anybody that I'm interested in. They were like, well, you may not like them, but it's something that you have to do at your age, kind of a thing. And I was totally shocked. I was like, is this like an intervention? And it had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with her and the choices that she made, and how uncomfortable it made her and her partner that I wasn't going to walk into the same life strategy.
I definitely felt that going into my 30s for sure, and have met some similar expectations from people, and it's not been comfortable. People just have this idea that you should do things a certain way, and then when you show up against the grain in the world, man, it can really rub people the wrong way. Yeah, makes it hard to have friends.
Yeah, well, it just makes them jiggy because you're just not following the paradigm. And I think in order for them to be friends with you, they have to have all their ducks in a row. Like everybody has to be following, the same path, the same rules, the same regulations. And if you don't, it's too upsetting for them, because I think on some it weighs on them about their choices, and them not making ideal choices for themselves, or not following their own inner sense.
It's like they don't trust themselves either, because if somebody outside of them is acting in an unpredictable way, we're back to that mirror ideology, right? Where if they're a mirror for the things that make them uncomfortable, if they don't want to have to go into that, they don't have any concept within their behavioral repertoire for what to do. It's like any truth within themselves just scares them, or if they have to act outside of the norm, they just shut down.
Yeah.
Shut down and project. And
so I had a friend of mine who was a medical doctor. This is years ago when I was like the hardcore rock climber. I'd actually like to get back into climbing. And then I got brain cancer, and that halted everything in my life. When you have bad vertigo and you can't stand up, rock climbing's just not not something you want to do. But she was about 20 years older than me, and she was a family practice medical doctor. She also was one of my clients, and she sent a lot of her patients to me because, I did a good job, and, people got well, and even her physical therapy patients she sent to me. So, because, she didn't want them injured by the physical therapist, because then they'd have to file a malpractice claim against her because she was the one that prescribed it. So she just sent people to me. So, but one of the conversations we had one time, I think it was around 30, I don't know, like 30 or 31, and her and I were having some wine and just, after climbing and talking. There was a group of us, but we were specifically talking about women. And I said, do you think there's like something wrong with women who may not be, prone to getting married right away and may not, want kids any way, shape, or form? I said, do you think that there's something wrong with people like that? And she knew I was kind of like talking about myself, And she said, well, if we look in primitive forms like animals, only 15% of animal mothers are really good mothers. And the other, 85% end up abandoning their offspring, killing their offspring, allowing other predators, to kill their offspring, or starving their offspring, because they don't want to feed them. And she said, humans are more like animals. And she said, at this point in time, so this would have been, like 20, like around 20 years ago, that we were having this conversation. And she said, in her practice as a family practitioner doctor, that what doctors do to the mothers that are not natural mothers, humans, is that we put them on a regular drugs, a regular dosage of medications. She said, so the quote unquote soccer moms that have these kids and then realize like they're really not happy. It's not that they don't like their kids, but they start to realize like this is just not a normal thing for them, and that, they're giving up their whole life. Well, in order to be able to do that, they can't go to their husbands and say, look, I've really decided now that I've had kids, it's a little too hard. Like, I'm not really sure I'm cut out for this job. And she said, so what they have to do is, because it wouldn't be acceptable, right, to the people around them or their families, is that they have to medicate them. So she said, we literally give them like a type of speed drugs during the day. They take a lot of natural, pharmaceutical speed. And then at night, we give them basically tranquilizers. So they live, 18 years, till they hit menopause, and then all of it breaks open and all the truth comes out, and then usually the marriages and everything fall apart and everything else. But, the women do the best that they can by holding on, but the doctors medicate them in order to be able to do that. Because she said, if only 15% of human mothers are going to be good mothers, it's not that the other ones are being bad mothers, but they may not be as good, and it may be a lot harder for them to play that role consecutively, and that we just drug them so that they can make it through.
It's hard. I think there's part of it where like you definitely just kind of have to like check out, or like the hormones and the instincts just take over.
Yeah. Well, I think that I'm not so sure. Like, I'm a great person that I could do a really good job mentoring kids and teaching kids things, but I'm not a good mom, like I wouldn't be a good person to even know my dog, she's like my kid. And as she's aging, she's becoming more stubborn and turd fried. But I just wouldn't be really good in that role. But I think that I could be really good as, like I said, a mentor. And that's usually what's happened in the past when my friends have, had problems during, where they had kids. I was always the one that would go pick up the kids or take the kids somewhere because there's a fight with the parents, or if they needed to be picked up from daycare or school because it's an emergency, I would go pick them up. Or sometimes they would just stay with me for several days, and I'd have like a really fun itinerary of stuff to do, like gardening and hanging out and cooking and whatever else, kind of a role. But I think I've always been kind of better in the mentor position. And I think that played a lot into it too, because I had so many friends that got married young and had kids, and then, the first marriage didn't work out, and they mid-20s, early they're, we're rolling into their second marriage with their next batch of children, and then that not working out, and then, hitting their mid-30s with, the third marriage, and then now they have, two families coming together full of kids, where you have like, 4 to 7 kids in one household, and, all the time that was necessary that I would go and help, with these kids, also kind of imprinted on me that, I didn't really want any of my own, because who would I be able to rely on, when I needed kind of a break, or because by that time my family was all dead. I had no one in my family to actually help me. So, I think I was also kind of lucky I didn't have kids and go down that road, because I also could see clearly that it would be a very, very difficult road.
It is hard, but I'm so grateful for my son. I'm so grateful for having my kid, and I just think that he came at the right time in my life to teach me certain lessons that I needed to learn, to just get me in alignment with myself. And like, he just feels like a piece that's been missing, but at the same time, I don't know, like, I love kids. I love kids in general, and I think they're just so full of pure innocence and knowledge and enthusiasm, and they just respond so well to guidance when it's so authentic, I think. Or like, when you're tapped into things that are more beyond, I think it's easier to speak the language of children sometimes, because they're more receptive to these more ethereal ideologies. You lose that energy with a lot of adults.
Yeah, well, that brain wave sequence ends at age 7.
Yeah.
And then you become alpha dominant, or alpha or beta. But yeah, you would fit into that good 15%. Like, you're a good mom. Definitely.
I love my little kiddo. He's neat. My favorite smell in the world is just the smell of his head, but it's that pheromone thing.
No, it's called growth hormone.
When it comes to your own kid, though, like, just like knowing the bond and the telepathic connection, like, it's just odd to me in so many ways. And then just going through the process of giving birth, oh, it's so painful. But I think it's taught me a lot about respecting life and respecting, like, what it takes to, like, have to, like, give up certain things for motherhood. And it's just, I don't know. But at the same time, like, I've seen mothers and I've seen women be able to do, like, just amazing, amazing things. And then I've just seen women who have never had kids just be some of the most amazing, amazing, nurturing women. So I don't know. Motherhood's cool. But I really like that it can show up in different forms, like the mothering and like Mother Earth, right? So intending to plants and animals, and I think when you're resonating in a more pure and a higher frequency, you can just nurture life in general. It's neat. Not a lot of people are in tune with their abilities to do that. They're like programmed to destroy things.
Yeah, no, I talked to my friend Par in Sweden a lot about that, about how, the running theme are these forces that destroy, like, our choices. And this is another thing too that blows me away, as I see so many people right now that have this energy that just destroys everything. Like, it's just so incredible. Like, it's even hard to explain, but it's like, because of the disassociation sometimes, and because of their behavior towards things, it just like destroys stuff. Like, for example, like you could have a person living in a place that, because of their disassociation or their energy or their anger or their other types of emotions, like their car never really runs right, no matter how much money they put in it and how many different mechanics they take it to, and other people drive it and it's really great, but for them it overheats, and it sounds like it's running on one cylinder. And then same person also starts having their roof leak for no reason, and nobody can find a reason why their roof is leaking into their living room. And like constant things happening because of their maybe inability to directly influence their reality, and then just the emotions like run amok, and just for them, like a different person could say drive their car and it would run great, but they drive it and it's just constantly not good, and it's just not sound, and it's just like this energy that keeps moving forward. And I see that a lot too. Like, it's not so much that they're creating it. Like if you said, maybe you should create a more positive reality, they wouldn't understand that because, they have no interaction with creating their life. And I think because of the lack of creating, maybe more of disassociating from it, and the world is such kind of a negative place that it just causes negativity and episodes of breakdown.
I hear all the time as an artist within the field, especially in teaching art, oh, I'm not an artist. I don't know how to do that. I can't draw. Like, people, when it comes to even just creating or making a thing or connecting to some sort of creative expression, have a really difficult time identifying with it.
Well, then you have a lot of artists, like you have all these artist themes too, I guess, like the starving artist, that they'd rather be a starving artist, or
there's a lot of stigma.
A lot of artists destroy their own lives through all kinds of different things.
Pointless, and then it's a challenging field to go into. Well, like I talk about as far as like responsibility goes, I think we've got a lot of artists in the world who aren't full on aware of what it is that they're doing when they're creating things. They're not aware of the power behind the creative process, and they're not in tune with creating from a space of a higher power. They're creating out of a space of ego, and so they're just pulling in, like regurgitating this, like the same sort of frequencies, energies, informations, and it just over a while stagnates and becomes very toxic, and we don't learn anything new from it. And so I think it's very rare that we find the persons who can identify as creators. I think that's why, like, art, what is art? I don't know, what is consciousness these days? Like, it's a very subjective experience. It's something I think that can be very intentional, right, but at the same time can be very functional, because there is a science behind the aesthetics and how our body responds to the way things are cultivated, right? So hence, like, the cultivation of consciousness, cultivating landscaping, like bringing together all these different elements. I think it's just really difficult for people to develop concepts, because there's just really awful, or just these stigmas behind what arts and creativity are, and maybe for good reason. That way not everybody necessarily thinks that they can do something, but at the same time, art has been turned into a commodity, and it's been turned into a tool for very deceptive means for these overarching systems that dictate behavior, that want to control behavior in very subliminal ways. But getting people to become aware of that means, like you're saying, breaking the addictions and the behavior patterns and the habits and disconnecting from the matrix and the realities. And people don't necessarily want to do that if it's comfortable. They hold on to that for as long as they can until they're forced to. They have to let it go. And then it's really uncomfortable.
You think that's why more people that are going through like a spiritual madness, because, Carolyn Meese used to talk about that, of how, you will hit a period in your life, spiritual madness, where you really lose your SHIT all over the place and you can't pull it together and everybody thinks that you're just totally nuts. But it's this moment that you have to go through in order to get to the other side where the sanity kind of is. You think that's why a lot of artists kind of end up, doing art kind of more full time when they're hitting that total bat poop crazy period in their life?
Well, maybe. I think you're referring to like having different breakthroughs and then getting to these periods where they can be very productive. But maybe it depends on the function. It's not necessarily how prolific somebody is.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to say the least, all the different ways that people try to pretend that they're not in the program. I am an individual. No, you're not. No. I have my own thinking. No, you don't. No. I am a unified being. I don't think so.
Most likely not. Right.
Not today. Okay, so what are you? So you're are you going to do any after the first of the year? Are you going to do any online group art therapy courses or anything like that for people?
I would like to. I would like to do more stuff, like group class-wise, face-to-face stuff. I'm kind of in a similar phase where I'm working on building some of the class platforms, so it's just taking some time to put all the information together and put the tools and the resources together. But I'm liking a lot of the face-to-face time and getting to connect with people one-on-one and getting to reach out and build relationships with people again on this front. Because I've gotten to connect with people in the past in events and in large group settings and to do readings for people, but with a lot of the shutdown and like the shift in energies, I haven't been able to connect with people in the usual way. So it's nice that I'm beginning to form new connections and ways of building those relationships with people. But doing more art classes, I think, would be fun, and just doing more videos. And now that I found my phone that's been missing, I've got my technology to do more. I'm looking forward to doing more videos and getting my YouTube channel stuff back on. And I want to do more stuff with YouTube and work on getting my videos off of Facebook. Not that there's necessarily like any problem that I've been having with Facebook, but just in terms of like being able to access different networks and different resources of people, or to have more potential to monetize the input, I think would be nice, because I get a lot of feedback through Facebook, and it would just be nice to be able to connect with people outside of that as well. But what are you doing? What's new for you? What do you have on?
Not a whole lot. Just trying to make decisions if I want to teach class. I want to wait until the dust settles. I want to wait till the dust settles through December and New Year, and then see what January is going to bring. So I want to hold off classes, but we'll just see if there's interest. But anyway, so Kelsey's going to do the poem today.
Oh, yeah. We're right
So she chose a poem called Apocalypse. So you want to do our leaving poem?
I will. And this is Apocalypse by Sri Chinmoy. Within, without the cosmos wide am I, in joyful sweep I loose forth and draw back all. A birthless, deathless spirit that moves and is still, ever abides within to hear my call. I who create on earth my joys and dole, the fulfill To fulfill my matchless quest in all my play, I veil my face of truth with golden hues and see the serpent night and python day. A consciousness bliss I feel in each breath. I am the self-amorous child of the sun. At will I break and build my symbol sheath and freely enjoy the world's unshadowed fun.
That's a really good poem. I've never heard that one before. It's nice. Very nice. All right, everybody.
It's fun.
So we're closing up. So we hope that you have a really good next week, and remember to stay awake and pay attention and consciously choose and fight against disassociation of the truth. And we'll see you again next Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Don't forget to donate if you can, and help us out. We just really would appreciate it over the holiday season. And we thank anybody who's listened to
Thank you.
to our madness. And I know. And we'll see you guys all again next week, or you'll hear us again next week. So anyway, have a great week, everybody.
Reach out to us if you need us. We're here.
Bye.
Bye.